Hello, and welcome to this week's Safety Brief. Today, we're diving into the Data Breach Survival Guide. Data breaches are every organization's nightmare, but knowing how to respond can make all the difference. Our cybersecurity experts, Mike and Matt, are here to walk us through a step by step guide to surviving and recovering from a breach. As always, thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us, Elizabeth.
Of course. So let's get started. When a breach is suspected, timing is everything. So, what are the first steps businesses should take once they suspect a data breach has occurred? Mike, want to start us off on this with step one?
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge we're going into a sensitive topic today, and it's one that may have some people, I won't say highly critical, but I would say in retrospect, everything's 2020, and this today's discussion is not to critique any existing SOPs or procedures or anybody's experience that they've navigated in the past, but more so kind of give an introductory framework to those that have never maybe contemplated what exactly do you do in the event of an incident like this. And so, just like we don't critique firefighters or law enforcement, this isn't a how to respond to every fire. This is a general framework, right? And so, I would say, the first thing that you ought to just be cognizant of is the adrenaline and emotional dump that is going to happen as fear of the unknown sets in, or maybe a breach in security confidence happens. Like you're going to hear people maybe say, like, well, how could this happen? I thought we had measures in to defend against this, right? It's uh, you got to acknowledge the human element of people's reaction to this event and an event like it, any event like it. And so be cognizant. There is an emotional intelligence that comes with navigating these, and not that those that haven't navigated it are unintelligent, but you have to have a steadfast resilience to think through the fog of that moment, or the fog of war, as it's commonly called. And so, but yeah, obviously, first and foremost is containment, right? You operate off of what is factual, not assumed. And so, you follow up with leads, you follow up with data. You trust but verify is a good kind of approach, right? But don't take any reports from users or IT admin not seriously, but just validate them, right? Dedicate resources to quote unquote bark up those trees, go hunt down those alleyways and pathways. But if there is suspicion, again, an abundance of caution is never a bad thing. So, within the scope of a breach being confirmed, I think that's kind of the starting point that we're assuming this type of scenario operates from. Containment is key. Stop the spread, right, is a common term that's been coined here in the past few years. And so, but again, focus on what you can control and maintain a level of self accountability that there are items and variables you can't control. And so, in that moment of uncertainty, grasp on that which you can control, and work towards that containment objective. And obviously, there's further steps from there. But I would say number one, be ready and be cognizant that people may say what they don't mean or not mean what they say, and there's just a lot of emotion in times like this, right? But I promise you that a solution oriented approach is far supersedes the effectiveness of a finger pointing or a blaming or a type of model that looks to go for blood, right? And right. So again, prefaces and disclaimers included, but I would say, step one being containment. Identify what factual evidence, not what assumed evidence you have of a breach, but then making sure you delegate resources. Many hands make light work where possible. To contain those machines, bring them offline, deploy additional security controls if you have them. And again, this is going to vary greatly between every organization that follows this rough workflow, but contain where you can contain, stop the spread.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Mike. And once the breach has been detected, confirmed, and contained, it's actually time to ask the critical question, and that's typically how bad is it? So, how can organizations quickly determine the scope of the breach and identify which data or systems have been compromised?
Yeah, I think it comes back to, similar if there's an incident, heaven forbid, in a combat zone or something, first and foremost, the things that you do is you take accountability of who you have and what you have, right? And so, who do we have accountability over, positive accountability, who are we maybe missing, who do we have confirmation of being injured, things of this nature. Obviously it's a combat mindset, but it translates into let's look at access logs over our domain controller, let's change some passwords, right? Things of that nature to make sure that you take certain actions. But the other component that you have to remember that, and again, this is nuanced and we're not legal experts or forensic analysis experts, but you also have to understand that if there is indeed a breach, you're potentially working, depending on the outcome, you're potentially working with a crime scene. You're potentially working with a crime scene. And so it's something to be cognizant of, what changes, what modifications you make. You want to be very cognizant in documenting those things that you take. And so, again, getting a team in a room, organizing the effort, being very surgical about change management and change approval, rather than everybody go out, batten down the hatches, do what you can. There could be a large amount of, unknown of what was done. And then when you go looking for artifacts, it's unsure what was potentially attributed to the breach and what was attributed to the response effort. And again, it may sound nuanced, but again, you have to treat it like a crime scene. So big chain of custody, make sure that access logs are intact. Certainly, there's backups as an option, there's others, but again, determining the scope and breadth of that impact is what do you have possible accountability or control over? What are those systems we don't think we have control over? And, act accordingly within those SOPs to respond to each of those scenarios.
You also have to ensure that if there is a breach, you cannot do anything if there is insurance that is involved until those that are deemed to be overseeing the entire investigation give you the go-ahead to do so. If you decide, and seen this before, where an incident occurs and people think, oh, we'll start remediating, you've just contaminated everything, and you've guaranteed that your insurance company is going to tell you, no, we will not be covering this. You will be on your own. Because there is no way that they can't guarantee that any of the damages weren't done by you and not by whoever was in the system.
Yeah,
so
thank you
you
for
have
that.
to, it's a very touchy situation. And we've seen a lot of people that, if you haven't researched it, there's a lovely thing called, what is it, Dunning-Kruging, I believe, or Dunning-Kruger or something. I don't know. I can't remember what it is. Basically, it outlines that you think that your capacity for the ability to handle something or your knowledge of the situation is more than what you actually have, because it operates on a bell curve. And most people, if they are at the level they think they are, would be at the very tip of that bell curve. In actuality, most people are over on this side of the bell curve, which means that they think they know more than they actually do, which puts them over on the side of the bell curve in the doing more danger than help category. So it behooves people to not make those kinds of moves if they don't have a team that's overseeing them and, saying, yes, this is within the scope of what we need to do. Or in this case, whoever the governing body is, like your insurance company, saying, yes, we have everything that we need outlined and documented for the state that it was in. Now you may go ahead and break the environment even more. There you go.
Yeah, I want to dig a little deeper into that actually, Matt, because in moments like this, clear communication is vital. So, when and how should businesses notify affected customers, and what's the best way to comply with regulatory requirements for breach disclosures?
Regulatory requirements are relatively clear cut. In most cases, Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I saw where if there was a breach, there's supposed to be disclosure within 72 hours. Disclosure to the governing or to the regulatory body within 72 hours. That doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to get notification to the end users. God knows that when the Change Healthcare breach happened, it took them damn near a year and a half to notify people. I actually got a notification and didn't even know that I was a part of anything that was going on with that, but it seems like blanket anybody that ever had anything to do with them at all started getting notifications. And if that's the case, that's not a quick process. They have to go back and they have to find every bit of data that could have possibly been taken. And then they have to find a way to correlate that to, the users and be able to communicate to them. How many of those addresses that they have on file are going to still be accurate? How many people put in valid email addresses? A lot of people don't put in a valid email address because they don't want to get spammed with all the crap you get, when you are a part of that. Now, in many cases with electronic documentation and stuff of that nature, it kind of becomes mandatory. You use an email, you're going to check, but they can't send you a disclosure like that via email. They have to send you a physical object saying or outlining all of the data. At least in the case of change, that's what they had to do.
And another question I've seen a lot too is when disclosures are being sent out, is it only to the affected individuals or do they have to disclose this information to anyone?
When they send it out, generally the people that are going to get it are the ones that have been impacted. There's two different things that they can generally send out. And I think Mike is probably bringing something up here. They do have two different things that they will send. They will have a general notice saying there has been a breach of our systems, blah, blah, blah. It's very generalized. It says, it does not appear as though your data was impacted. There's another one they'll send out, which will give more detail if your data was found within said breach, where it outlines a little bit more about what could have actually been in there. See, there you go. The type of information that was taken, the likelihood of misuse, potential damage if the information is misused. That's the one that you'll get if any of your data was actively found in said leak or theft or whatever they want to actually call it.
Yeah, this is, I just admit, this is a nuanced topic here that we're covering that may vary greatly based upon your state, your country, and, even in certain circumstances of businesses, SOPs that, you need to determine your legal requirements first, right? So notifying law enforcement, by the way, this document, just for the sake of credibility and accountability, is coming from the FTC and their data breach response, a guide for businesses. We can be sure to include this link here in the recording description and notes. But essentially what we've covered thus far is, what to do in the event of a breach, move quickly to secure those systems and fix vulnerabilities that caused it, discover the gap, plug the gap, mobilize the team right away. And there's going to be two primary components here: identifying a data forensics team and legal counsel. These are not going to be the same people. Okay, so be wary of entities that say they are one in the same or both of these as far as whose camp they belong to. And this isn't like a bureaucratic point I'm making. It's more so right person, right seat. Right. And so, again, Blockworks is not a team of insurance experts. We're not here giving legal advice. But again, you're going to want a technical forensics team understanding what are the affected systems, collect and analyze the evidence, because there are tools dedicated for this, but also legal counsel, right? So again, in your service agreements, in your own business SOPs, under the scope of the compliances that your business is subject under, that's where you're going to be you're really subjected to. Again, be mindful of public entities, right? So if there was a data breach, I would grasp firmly on any of the social media or the website elements, right? Because public defacement is one way that threat actors like to speed up a sense of urgency from responding teams that, hey, again, there's a focus on certainty and what you have control over that threat actors can evaporate really quickly. So if they compromise systems while you're digging up that breadcrumb trail, now they're on the website posting a picture of them hacking your system on the company's main webpage. And these are not metaphorical examples. These are tactics that threat actors utilize to create a greater sense of lack of control, lower the sense of certainty, and again, that big adrenaline dump that says, just give them what they want, just give them what they want, make the pain go away, right? And so if you have positive accountability over these things, positive control, that's important. Fixing vulnerabilities is a whole different safety brief that we can do. But what we're really talking about here is, again, the appropriate parties. So legal requirements are going to be a big component here. Law enforcement's going to be a big component. Mainly, it's, again, one of those things that if you're in a car accident, regardless of whose fault it is always going to benefit the outcome of that case if there is a legal document that in the form of a police report or whatever that documents what happened. And so what Matt was alluding to earlier is be careful of what changes you make or actions you take. The purpose of that is no different than if you hit somebody's bumper by accident, you get out of the car and you start pulling on the bumper, right? Like that's not the thing to do, right? Don't go immediately try and fix the thing that just happened. Take inventory of what happened, document it with photos, right? That's the kind of response. Do not admit fault, et cetera, et cetera. Again, this is not legal advice. This is your best friends from Blockworks doing the best we can to educate and enlighten. So again, notify law enforcement. Did the breach involve PHI? And this is where it's going to be like stacking upon stacking nuance of how to disclose, when to disclose, exactly what Matt was talking about. So if there is PHI or PII related to medical data, there's a whole breach notification resource outline here, what the FTC says, what HIPAA says, etc. If there is social security numbers involved, you have to notify credit bureaus. If there is banking information involved, specific to, there's instances where you'll notify the bank. There's instances where they're going to notify the users. But again, this is a great document to kind of guide you through this. But ultimately, some helpful points to kind of wrap up this notification phase is consult with law enforcement about the timing of the notification so it doesn't impede the investigation. It's very much what does the threat actor know versus what do you think they know? And so if there is a public notification that goes out that we have been hacked, here is this. Well, now the threat actor knows that right? And so again, there's a dynamic here that
it moves some
timing is
urgency to
important.
them doing what they're going to do with that data before it gets locked down.
Right. So just be cognizant of when that data goes out. And we're not saying stall on that news, but be tactical with local law enforcement of when that goes out, who that goes out to. Designate a point person for releasing that information. This can very quickly turn into a committee, a panel of 25 people. Give it to two or three. Make sure that they have the relevant notes, the relevant updates from the relevant parties. What is true? What is factual? What is theory? Be very clear when you put something out. Let it be factual. And again, right? There's some other helpful tips here, but not to belabor this point. But there is some very, and again, I got to give it to the United States government. There's been some good effort made on standardizing what does breach notification look like, dependent upon what is the nature of the breach, what is the nature of the data, what was accessed, what was sold, right? All of that. And so some companies will offer a year of free credit monitoring after the event as a courtesy, not like we're going to wipe this over or gloss this over, but hey, we take your data seriously. We're sorry for what happened. We're going to extend this. So just some recommendations there.
It's the other side of the spectrum we have to also consider, though. And I only bring this up because recently I saw somebody posting about this on our not favorite website known as Reddit. Somebody was asking for recommendations for a new solution for their environment because they felt that the one that they were using was not doing them justice. And when asked why, they said, "Oh, well, we were recently breached." And the person said, "Oh, well, once you get done going through all of the disclosures and everything else, then you should start, vetting a new product." The response was, "What disclosures? We're not going to tell anybody."
Oh.
So that's the other end of the spectrum. You have companies that know for a fact that their security is crap, that are getting breached. And even though there is a requirement that you disclose that, there is nobody enforcing that. Because unless you tell them, they're not going to know that you were breached. So there's no way that they can enforce anything of that nature unless they suddenly develop precognition or something and they can just sense that it happened. But that's one of the other things you have to also consider. When you're working with any company out there, or when you're working with your own company, you need to be operating under two mindsets. Mindset number one is assume breach. You should never assume that people are not going to get into your stuff. It's not going to happen. It's ignorant in any scheme of things to think that you're not going to be breached. It's going to happen. Probably already
Yeah.
has happened. You just don't even know about it. The other mindset is you need to be thinking about how can we keep them from getting into our environment by preventing. And that's the thing. There was a lovely post that was made the other day on LinkedIn, which discussed, you want to be leveraging technology that is going to prevent them from pulling into your driveway, much less getting to your door.
Yeah.
By the time they get to your door, it's too late. There's too many things that they can do, that they can scout, that they can see while they are sitting there. If you cut them off before they have a chance to get that close to your castle, you don't have to worry about pouring out boiling oil. They're long range enough you can hit them with catapults. I can tell you this, a catapult does a lot more splash damage than burning oil being poured down off of, one of your turrets. Just saying, medieval defenses. had the
Medieval
right
warfare
idea.
weaved into
Exactly.
the response. Welcome to the safety brief.
There we go.
Yeah,
But
and to our
that's-
list. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that's how everybody need or should be operating these days, with those two different mindsets. You have to assume somebody's going to get in, work backwards from that. That helps you isolate your critical components. If you know what they're going after and you work backwards and say, okay, these are the crown jewels. What do we need to put in place to keep people from getting to those crown jewels? That's going to help you secure and assume and keep that assume breach mentality alive. That goes right into that prevention mindset, because now you're saying, okay, we know this is where they're sitting. What prevention can we use that will slow them down or just completely keep them out in the first place? Make your lives easier. Work smarter. Don't work harder. The amount of stuff you're going to have to do after a breach, a hell of a lot more than what you're going to have to do if you stop the breach in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Well, and speaking of having a lot to do, to our listeners, I know it can sound daunting, all the lists and all this information that we're kind of throwing at you. And that's why preparation is also key to recovery. So with that in mind, what role does an incident response plan play in mitigating damage? And what are the critical elements of a strong plan? Matt kind of started us off on that as well.
It's an incident response plan should just be that. It's a plan. Okay. What's the number one thing that happens to most plans? They go sideways. So you need to be planning for contingencies.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you have an incident response plan in place, not every attack is the same. There's going to be nuances that you need to think about, that you need to look at, that you need to consider, that one breach or one attack may actually leverage, but the other attack may not. Handling, and I'm just going to put this out there, a breach could also be a physical breach. Somebody could access the building that shouldn't be accessing it. You're going to handle that a lot differently as a part of your incident response plan than somebody that is remotely accessing a server because Bob left RDP wide open to the internet. It all comes down to, you can have a plan, but you also need to make sure that you're agile enough, you're fluid enough to be able to adapt to whatever the situation is that you're looking at. Otherwise, you're doomed for failure.
Yeah, I think my take on this component of, what to do after the fact is, number one, coming back to a solution-oriented mindset. Very few breaches are due to the explicit negligence of an individual, meaning very few people will walk up to a metaphorical door, leave it open, and then tell some bad guy, here's how you get in, meaning it's not their fault, right? And
Have
so
you
just
seen
be very
Microsoft
cognizant.
lately? Just check.
Be very cognizant, staying on topic of the humans that you have responding to this effort, right? And so I speak more so to the incident response leaders and the organization leaders of that. Again, you're going to have an adrenaline dump. You're going to have a lot of uncertainty introduced into your day at the worst possible time. But I would say, be cognizant of the human element, be respectful of the human element, do the best you can. But it is going to be important to clearly, again, go back, clearly document any changes made or findings discovered, and if you've done a penetration test or a vulnerability scan and you have not gone through and itemized, here's what we found, here's when we resolved it, and here's when we rescanned to validate that was resolved, that is precursor effort. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That kind of stuff, that pre-planning is going to pay dividends. And so, because what you're doing is you're looking at the whole house, you're doing a home inspection, and you're saying, here's every possible thing that we think could maybe go south or incur significant financial loss in the next 12, 18, 24, 36 months. And when you resolve it, you greatly reduce the risk of that happening, greatly, like by a power of magnitudes. And so I would just say, don't fall victim to being, educated beyond your obedience, right? If you know that you have vulnerabilities, if you know that you have systems that are subject to risk, solve those now, right? Don't sit on them. Certainly there's levels of risk that you have to accept and you take into account. I get it. But if that stack of things starts piling up, right, start counting the cost of, hey, I can only ride on these tires that are flat, that have holes on them, that are for so long before the inevitable happens, right? And this isn't a fear, uncertainty, and doubt conversation. This is, you pulled up into a gas station, you saw your tire have a hole in it, and you said, I'm not going to really do with that right now. And you drove home, right? And there's very few instances where about the vulnerability cognitively, explicitly. Here's where this entry point is. So if you know about those things, stop investing more money in tools to tell you something's wrong. Invest time and focused, concentrated effort into resolving the things that you know are wrong. Do that rather than go find more things wrong. And I see a lot of companies fall victim to, well, we got this report, it's great, let's get a second report, let's get a third report. It's like, hey, take the report you have, take what you know that are sore points, resolve those, take a quarter and dedicate the time to those, and communicate to the C-suite that, hey, another report, another tool is going to be worth nothing. It's actually going to be a wasted expense if we don't take the time to plug the gap we know we have. Right? And so, again, a little bit of a tangent, but post-incident, identify the entry points to the best of your ability. That's why the incident responders are going to be a big piece of this. They're going to look at and see, okay, hey, we have broken window on the front part of the house. We have unlocked door in the back part of the house. They're going to inventory these things. They're going to show you these things. One side point that Matt made earlier, and again, this is not coming from an insurance expert, so do not find me in the comment section, but there is a piece of insurance policies that say that those allowances for forensics, investigation, PR, and media are paid out after the fact. After the fact. So here's what that means. Be sure that you know that you need to file that claim. Before you punch that ticket, you have a claim on file, and you've already started effort, and then incident responders show up and say, hey, there's really not much we can do because of XYZ changes that have been made, but they've already showed up. They've already started their T&M. So just be cognizant of what you're doing in the order of operations, right? If you don't know what your cyber insurance policy says, freaking read it today, because the way that these things are worded, most often, this is a generalization, is you will be told things like a $1 million cyber insurance policy. What that means is, in pragmatics, that you have $250,000 for forensics. You have another $250,000 for media and PR. And once you hit the cap for those subsections, there is no borrowing or rolling over allocated funds to that effort. So before you go and ramp up a bill that you can't pay nor anyone else can pay, be cognizant of what your policy says. And this is just encouraging everyone to have a conversation with their insurance expert, not Blockworks,
not Mike.
Matter of insurance.
Not
any of us.
Mike.
But just know what you have and understand that, right? And an example I give you is, with home insurance, a lot of these insurance agencies will just say, hey, here's what we think your house is worth, and here's what the average, if you own a house worth this much, you have this much worth of stuff, right?
Right.
Look at that number and ask yourself, do I have $120,000 or $90,000 worth of stuff, right? If the answer is no, it's okay to go to your insurance agent and say, this doesn't make sense. Help me make sense of it. And you'd be surprised. Like, again, insurance agencies are doing the best they can, but If it doesn't make sense to you, that's an okay conversation to have, right? And again, your business is going to have certain needs, but you got to understand these insurance companies are scoping as many businesses as they can. Nobody knows your business as well as you. So you can't trust that, hey, they're going to know everything that we need. Have a conversation internally, look at that policy and revise it if you need to. But you got to understand that it is a life preserver, but it is not a boat to get to shore with, right? Like, it is going to buy you time. It is going to ease the pain of that ship being wrecked and you having to go overboard, metaphorically speaking. But it is not your salvation, right? There is things to do. There is effort to accompany, but look at the gap. Have those incident responders come in and identify those things. As soon as you see something that doesn't look right, again, any change that you make, any vulnerability, remediate it. Document it. Because what may happen is you see, like Matt said, RDP open to the internet, and then you plug it, and then 2 hours later when IR responders show up and they do a scan from the public interface, they don't see RDP open. And they're going to be wondering, I don't know how these guys got in, right? And so again, document the time and the date and the location and what you did, where you did it. And again, if it's just a good old yellow pad of paper, make it old fashioned, doesn't matter what it is, just document it. So, and it's with the dopamine dump, the adrenaline dump, it's going to be hard going through all those motions of, hey, we got it. We think we got it. We think we gapped. We closed the gap. Just document everything you can.
Once it's all said and done, and you are looking at, all of the reports that you have. And as Mike said, you don't need to do a report and then another report and then another report. You don't need death by 1,000 reports. That's useless. There is no purpose for that at all. What you should be looking at is get that initial report, as Mike said, fix the things that you can fix. Make sure you are prioritizing. What are the most critical things that need to be addressed? Get them out of the way. Then, because somebody from the outside world managed to get into your house, you should really sit down and consider having a pen test done. Looking internally is great to see what's there. Looking externally to see what kind of footprint is available for somebody to leverage to get into your area is a completely different realm. Now, full disclosure, there are a lot of vendors out there that will sell you a pen test. Most of those will ask you to run an executable in your environment, and that is not a pen test. No. That is them basically looking and saying, hey, look, we know how to parse Windows event logs, and then giving you a bunch of stuff that scares you. That's not what you need. What you need is the scary person that sits in a corner with a computer and is willing to try and break into your environment. You need a black box pen test. Correct. Full black box pen test. All they know is this is the company name. Get into our stuff. Don't give them any IPs. Don't give them any user IDs or anything, because there's different levels of a pen test that you can go through. Black box is the one that you really want to have done. It is not cheap. But guess what? If you just got breached,
that wasn't cheap either.
that wasn't cheap either. So maybe you set aside the money that you would use to hire a crappy DJ in Vegas for your party and use that for getting pen testing done on your environment to help save you. Because I can tell you this, if you are a publicly traded company, people are going to care a lot more, and shareholders are going to care a lot more about knowing that the stuff is safe and knowing that they're not going to have to worry about losing a ton of money to another incident than going to a party that quite literally nobody is going to remember after they leave the party. I don't care how cool the party is. It's still a sales party. And you know what? Nobody's going to remember it unless you misspell your banner. And then they're going to remember it forever.
Was there a party you wish you were invited to?
No. I'm actually just laughing because I saw somebody that at one of the last shows in Vegas, one of the last big shows. You guys were actually at the big show. They spent basically, I'm assuming, all of their marketing budget for the entire year and next year hiring Deadmau5 to DJ a party for them, which that isn't even DJing. That's pushing play. Big difference.
With
But-
a mask on.
with a mask on, no
Still
less.
be a cool party.
I mean,
He's
there's better.
salty. He didn't get invited. It's okay.
That's
Matt.
okay.
There's better. There's lots better out there. But no, it's one of those things. It's looking where you responsibly are using the money.
Yeah.
Use it to keep people safe. Use it to ensure that the livelihoods of your employees aren't going to be cut short because of the fact that you get breached and now you have to let go a bunch of people because, oh, we have to spend, minimum of like $4 million to recover from the ransomware incident, much less all the other that we're going to have to spend on top of that. It's just a little bit of precaution could help. A little bit of prevention can help.
Thank you for that. Well, finally, to close us off for today, let's discuss long-term strategy. What action should businesses take to rebuild trust and strengthen their cybersecurity defenses after a breach? Because we know every time a big company gets breached, it's all over the news. Your reputation is being tanked. People are trying to flood away from utilizing your tool or service or whatever it may be. So reputation is a huge one here. How do you recover from that? What are your next steps?
Well, you need to do what most companies don't do in that situation, and you need to operate with candor and transparency. A lot of them, and the reason that most people do not like when a company gets breached is because it takes them far too long to come out and acknowledge it. Most people find out about the breach from other sources before the company even comes out and acknowledges there was a problem. So if something happens, own up to it. We know that nobody is going to be perfect. We know that there is always going to be a possibility that something happens. What really annoys everybody is when it happens and you hear about it from sources that aren't even in the US talking about this breach, and the company is just sitting there silent and almost to the point of, making it seem like they don't acknowledge that there ever was a breach, that a breach never happened. If everybody else is talking about it, pretty sure it happened. Your customer base is going to be much happier if you just come out and say, look, this happened. This is what we're doing to ensure that this kind of stuff does not happen down the road. Don't go into specifics. Okay. I'm just going to say that. If you say we are going to implement full AES 256 encryption across all of our stuff, you know what the threat actors are sitting there doing? Figuring out the easiest way to bypass that AES 256 encryption. There's ways that they can do it. There's ways that they can figure out how you're going to do it, what they're going to do to bypass it, and find weak points that they're still going to be able to get in. Don't give specifics. Just say, we're intending to address these issues with, X, Y, and Z. Very generic, constant updates, constant reviews, technology refreshes, everything. The biggest thing, additional training. We find that most of these issues happen because somebody was improperly trained or somebody had access to things that they shouldn't have access to. That's where identity and access management comes in. If somebody does not need to have access to the crown jewels because they are an intern that works 2 days a week, why does their account have the ability for them to access that information? The other end of that spectrum is if you tell people you're going to do it, you have to do it. And if you tell them you're going to improve your access management, that means that when somebody requests access to something and they're done with it, somebody has to go in there and revoke that access, which means more work, which, trust me, I get it. People don't like to do extra work on top of what they're already doing. IT groups are stretched super thin as it is. And most of them are doing the work of 2 to 3 people. But set a process. Find a way to make it easier on everybody. Just clearly communicate. That's all the people want. Treat us like we treat you. We're giving you our information. Give us the respect to let us know when there's been a misappropriation of our information.
Yeah, well said, Matt. And I'll add one more thing here to the screen share. And first off, obviously, who is Blockworks? We're a prevention-centric zero-day security solution operator, right? So we have a fully staffed SOC. We're 100% US-based, and our niche is prevention. So we share this stream not as experts of breach response or incident cleanup, right? But mainly as a start of a conversation for a lot of our listeners and people that tune in and catch the recording after the fact as, hey, I remember you never thought of this before, but maybe I should start thinking along the lines of some of these things. The screenshot I'm sharing here, and we'll get it linked as well, is Microsoft's Cyber Signals. It's a threat intelligence report that they put out periodically. I reference this in a lot of the presentations that I get to do, and what is the left column of 4 things? These are the 4 common denominators in successful breaches that Microsoft has identified. And something I have to point out about number 2, 3, and 4 is they're preventable. They're 100% preventable. Missing or disabled security products is something within the control that we have. Misconfigured or abused applications is something that we have within the control that we have. And slow patching is something that we can 100% control, right? And so, again, stolen passwords, unprotected identities, sometimes passwords are going to be compromised. Sometimes going to be data breaches to a certain degree. Can you prevent it? Can you mitigate it? Yes, but there's going to be nuance. The list on the right are just 4 helpful takeaways of what you can do to get more in front of these things, right? Are they 100% preventable? No. But similar to heart disease, there are very foundational, very rudimentary, very easy to start with low cost tomorrow things to do to mitigate your risk. Exercise, get outside, change your diet, right? Like these don't take $10,000 investments, right, to do. And so with this, authenticate identities, address security blind spots. We've talked about this. Matt mentioned a penetration test to follow a vulnerability scan, right? Don't go and pay the money for a penetration test when you know very well you're going to fail it, right? And so exercise some due diligence, harden, and then contract them to come in and tell you what you didn't find or you didn't know on your own. Internet-facing assets is going to be a big one here in the hardening of them. Remote help desk, remote apps like LogMeIn Rescue or TeamViewer, ConnectWise, Automate, BombGuard, others, right? There's a whole slew of them. But specifically, these remote access apps are common entry points, are common exploits that threat actors use if they can get access to them. They're not bad tools. They're just great tools in the hands of bad guys, right? And so it just depends on who's able to access them. And keep systems up to date. This is everything from the mobile devices your users bring into the office, the devices you have in conference rooms and others, right? You don't think that you can update your routers. You don't think you can update your IoT devices. Shocker, you can. There are vulnerability patches for those things. And so again, these are just helpful tips. If you want to pause the recording after the fact, maybe review these. Again, this is Cyber Signals. It's a threat intelligence publication from Microsoft, but helps address what are some common denominators in successful breaches and how can you live left of boom with prevention-centric controls, right? That's what we're all about here. And so hopefully that's valuable as you guys have tuned in and give you some takeaways.
Yeah, thank you for that, Mike. And to any of our audio-only audience members, we will throw both of the links from the screen shares today in the description of the actual podcast as well. So feel free to navigate over to those and check those out, along with navigating over to blockworks.com/blogs to check out a recent blog that also uncovered this topic a little bit further as well. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Remember, a data breach might feel like the end of the world, but with the right response and preparation, it can become a learning experience that strengthens your organization. A big thank you to our experts, Mike and Matt, for sharing their insights today and every Thursday here on the Safety Brief. It's much appreciated. And thank you to all. And thank you to all for tuning in. We hope to see you next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, where we will unpack the debated TikTok ban and data privacy. Until then, stay frosty.
Thanks all.